Good day to you. My apologies for this shirt, but not really. I'm not dissing ESU. I do happen to have 2 degrees from Penn State, so that's why I'm wearing a Penn State shirt. So you've been at ESU, you've probably walked up to the Fine Arts Building, and if you've walked out of the Fine Arts Building, you've probably been, well, I don't know if I would say insulted or offended, but at least you've been taken aback by the sculpture that sits in front of it. Have you noticed that big red, rusty sculpture? Yeah, it's supposed to be a sumo wrestler, and it's supposed to be rusty. It's a kind of art that was designed, as I understand it, to actually disrupt the patterns of going in and out of the Fine Arts Building. That's why that statue is front and center, and you have to go around it to get to your vehicles. So it is disrupting patterns of going in and out of the building. That's what it's supposed to do. And the reason that I start class like that today is because we're taking on a perspective that is also supposed to be disruptive. It's supposed to be disruptive not only to looking at media, but also to the perspectives that we've been studying in this class. It's supposed to be disruptive to those as well, saying that the prior perspectives that we've used to study media have not been adequate to addressing what this perspective addresses. So this perspective is called queer theory, Queer. And that word is a popular term in our language. We've usually come to understand to mean something along the lines of something is different, but in a not okay way. That's not the way that we're talking about queer in this chapter. This chapter is going to require you to do a lot of digging in and of yourself. I'm not the best expert on this material. It's some new learning material to myself as well when I started teaching media criticism. It is very interesting to me, but I don't have the kind of comprehensive knowledge that I can communicate as well as the book can. So I hope that you're able to dig into the chapter deeply here. So queer analysis picks up from feminist analysis, actually, and it's an interdisciplinary perspective that seeks to disrupt socially constructed systems of meaning that are surrounding sexuality. So the way that we talk about people's sexuality, that's supposed to be disrupted by queer analysis. And it takes a look at this idea of a binary problem, which I introduced in my last video lecture, that is trying to see the world in one of two ways and only one of two ways. In this case, seeing human beings as either heterosexual or homosexual. There's a binary that this chapter argues is false that's there. And that actually heterosexual and homosexual lives are culturally constructed just like gender is constructed in the last chapter. And what you end up with, according to many of the authors in this chapter, is an unfair system that is represented in the term heteronormativity. Heteronormativity refers to a system of inequity that is derived from this binary between homosexual and heterosexual depictions in the media. So that's what we're taking on in this chapter. There's a queer theorist named Eve Sedgwick, and Eve argued that heterosexual people are portrayed as normal or desirable, and therefore, in the absence of portraying homosexual people that way, homosexual people are automatically portrayed as abnormal and undesirable. And part of the process that takes place here is that word othering again. It's a sociological term, in this case, sexual othering. It refers to privileging heterosexuality. And the author, Eve, makes that case by saying there are many derogatory words for homosexuality. Faggot, for example, dyke. These are some of the harshest, cruelest words for homosexuality, but we don't have any comparable words for heterosexuality. So that's where sexual othering comes in. It privileges heterosexuality in the way that we talk about it. One of the most famous French thinkers, French philosophers, to contribute not just to philosophy, but also to this field is Michael Foucault, Foucaults. You'll study him in our senior seminar as well. He's a French 19th century thinker, and he argued that the 19th century portrayed homosexuality as a perversion. And the reason for that was because sexuality is a result of class warfare in the 18th century, that the upper class asserted sexuality, that they were very sexually promiscuous and heterosexually promiscuous. And they did that to separate themselves out from the lower class, to say that they were more privileged to be able to have that kind of life, but the lower class was not. Now, of course, we know in real life that probably was no difference, but this is from the earliest threads of how heterosexuality became a normative behavior. Next up for discussion is Judith Butler. She has a book called Gender Trouble, Feminism and the Subversion of Identity. And she developed a theory in this book called gender performativity, where that theory says that people act in accordance with the external norms for their gender identity. So people act according to what is expected of them. Those norms are being applied based on whether you're homosexual or heterosexual. Again, that binary there, not accounting for people who may be bisexual or trisexual or transitioning from one sex to another or have transvestite. There's a whole collection of, it's difficult to know what to call them. In some cases, behaviors. In some cases, it's a genetic disposition. In other cases, it's unknown. And so this is what Judith Butler is trying to talk about, that the way that gender is treated in the media and as by extension, the way that people's sexuality is portrayed, is that what it does is it reinforces heterosexuality as the normal kind of behavior. And she says that because of that, you need to have subversion taking place to change this system of thinking. What subversion is disruptive things like queer theory. And she also says that's why you have drag performances. It's a disruptive thing. It's bringing out to people the idea of people cross-dressing and I don't know, parading is the right word, performing. So now let's go into 3 ways that queerness is visible in the media. These categories are called queerness and visibility. The first one is sexual stereotypes in American media. And again, we have these binaries here. We have the binary of natural versus deviant. Heterosexual is portrayed as natural, deviant is not. If you look at older films like Alfred Hitchcock, great horror film director, he has a deviant plot that is in this film Rope that implicates homosexuals in what's going wrong in the film. And so that's a very classic example of how this natural versus deviant binary has been represented by media. Next up, you have the monogamous versus promiscuous binary dimension, where heterosexuals are linked to being monogamous, but homosexuals, through the media portrayal, are linked to be more promiscuous, having more partners. And that there's also a further level of judgment that's placed on them as that's a bad thing, having more than one sexual partner. So you can read some more about that. There's some more ideas in that particular section. Let's move on to queerness and visibility, the second area, which is the problems with the positive representation. And what this is saying is that there's 2 dimensions to think about when we talk about how people with different sexual orientations are represented in the media. One is the visibility of them. Are they there? And are they there in the same numbers that other people are on TV shows and on web pages and producing music? Are alternative, I don't want to say alternatively, but are non, that's what we're trying to say here, non-heterosexual. That's what we're trying to say. Not alternative, because again, that others, people who are not heterosexual, but to say non-heterosexuals, are they present in our media? And then the second question is, that would be visibility. And then the second is, are they represented in a way that is beneficial to people who are in a similar situation as them? So what the book has found is that visibility has improved. We definitely have a lot more non-homosexual characters on television. We definitely have a lot more non-heterosexual characters in film, but representation has not. And so the whole concept of coming out, for example, it discloses sexuality as a drama, like it should be a dramatic unfurling of a story. So now we move on to the third one, which is consequences of a heteronormative media representation. And that's where we have 2 images of being sexual. Again, a binary. One image is natural, monogamous, secure heterosexuals. The other is deviant, oversexed, androgynous homosexuals. These are some of the consequences. And now let's move on to queerness and invisibility. This is the last area. This is this concept of camp. It's a little bit tough even for me to still kind of process. Camp and the fourth persona. You can read about them. It draws on the work of Susan Sontag and Jack Bubicio. They define camp as the elements in a person or a situation that expresses a gay sensibility. a gay sensibility. So it's an alternate personality other than media as normal personality for portraying gay people as all these qualities that we've talked about, promiscuous, etc. So this camp idea is portraying people more securely who are gay, and it uses irony, theatricality, humor, and aestheticism. You can read about it in the book. And then there's a concept that they also introduce under the talking about the fourth persona. It's the textual wink. So a fourth persona is a person who's where the author of a text, and again, when we use author and we use text in this class, we're referring not to a book author and a written text. We're referring to a person who creates media content. So the author could be a director, could be a songwriter, the text could be a song, it could be a book, could be a web page, etc. So the fourth persona is where the author of the text provides an impression that only some of the audience will notice. It's a wink. That's what it's called. It's a wink. So to people who are in tune with it, people who are recognizing what the second level of the narrative is saying, will have a connection to that author. It's like a secret inside communication going on between the author and a very small portion of the audience that is taking in the film. Or people who love Quentin Tarantino films, for example, they feel that he speaks to them personally. There's a personal statement that he's making, and that's what's going on here. And what the wink will do is it provides an invisible means by which queer perspectives find a voice in the heteronormative media landscape. And so it's a way of rectifying the imbalance that exists that has to be pointed out through a disruptive perspective like queer analysis. So that's our talk for today. I hope you dig into the material in the chapter. Have a great day.